So, you guys ever heard that saying about signs coming in threes? I never gave it too much credence in the past, but I gotta say, I have noticed a pretty interesting trend in modern entertainment over the last couple years or so. If I had to describe my taste in television series, I would say there are three types of shows that I have historically been most interested in. 1. Surreal live-action dramas that often border on dark comedy. 2. Adult Swim cartoons with unconventional animation or art styles. And 3. Anime. Usually the kind of anime that are made by this guy, or the kinds of anime that are at least very similar to the kinds made by this guy. So it makes sense that 3 shows I recently watched that left a profound impact on me were Severance, a surreal live-action drama that often borders on dark comedy, Common Side Effects, an Adult Swim cartoon with an unconventional art style, and Lazarus, the most recent anime made by this guy. But you know something else that these 3 shows have in common? They all have a very consistent theme and premise revolving around pain. No, not him, but pain the feeling. More specifically, all 3 of these stories are about the removal of pain and suffering, and how the commodification of curing our collective pain, both mental and physical, could have deeply disturbing effects on us as individuals and as a society at large. Here's something you probably already figured out. Pain is not very fun to deal with. It actually kind of fucking sucks. But here's something else you've hopefully realized by now. Enduring pain and finding ways to face it head on and overcome it is critically important in facilitating growth. Lifting weights and exercising is literally the process of slowly tearing your muscles so that they rebuild themselves back stronger. The phrase, "what doesn't kill you makes you stronger," is obviously all about going through tough times in order to find ways out of those hard times and using that knowledge to improve your life going forward. Again, this is all obvious, right? I'm not saying anything that you most likely haven't heard of or thought of before. But if that's the case, if we are all intimately familiar with how important pain and suffering are to making us stronger and better people, why do so many of us run and hide from what causes us pain?
I acknowledge that henceforth my access to my memories will be spatially dictated. I will be unable to access outside recollections whilst on Lumen's severed basement floor, nor retain work memories upon my ascent. I am aware that this alteration is comprehensive and irreversible.
It's an interesting question with many equally as interesting answers. But before we get into my answer to the question, let's talk about Severance. Severance is an amazing show. I'm sure you've at least heard about it, if not watched it yourself by now. But if you haven't, I have to say that it's well worth the hype. If you have ever worked a corporate job you hated or felt like you were wasting your life at, I highly recommend this show for you. But unlike corporate jobs when they're looking for new hires, even if you don't have experience in corporate business, I still recommend this show to you because my girlfriend has never worked in an office a day in her life and she still got hooked on Severance when I showed it to her. It's got hilarious comedy, edge-of-your-seat tension, captivating cinematography and acting performances, insane plot twists, and maddening amounts of mystery and intrigue. But one of the most interesting elements of the show for me is the sinister company at the crux of all this drama. Lumen Industries is a multifaceted biotech company that employs most of the main cast of characters. Mark, played by Derek from Step Brothers, and his fellow co-workers Dylan, Irv, and Helly are all severed, which is a neat little procedure that Lumen offers to its employees where they split your psyche in half so that you have a work self who only exists at work during work hours called an innie, and your regular self who exists mostly everywhere else called an outie. This procedure is very controversial in the show, and those that go through with it are often judged and even ostracized by others in society for the whole human rights violation of it all. At first, the severance procedure appears to just be for Lumen employees, but eventually we learn that Lumen has greater plans for the Severance project. They don't just want their workers to be severed, they want the entire world to be severed. And not just severed from having to suffer through a day at the office, but severed from anything that they don't want to feel. Dentist appointments, airplane trips, childbirth, hell, even raising your child could be an experience that you are completely spared from having to endure if you wanted. Mark is severed because his job at Lumen requires it, but there's also a much more personal reason that he chose that job and wanted to be severed for. He sought out a severed job in the first place because he had just recently lost his wife Gemma to a
tragic accident,
and he wanted some way of escaping that pain, even if it was only for 8 hours a day. So he figured, sure, go ahead and chop my mind in half and create an entirely separate version of me that knows nothing but office work. office work, and breathing. Most of Mark's arc in the show is about trying to fool himself into believing that running from his pain and in turn pushing it off onto another person is the right way to live, and that doing all of this is somehow helping him overcome his pain. But obviously, that's not the case because hiding from what causes you pain is almost never the way to actually overcome it. Unless you're running from Michael Myers or a Predator or some shit like that. In that case, yeah, you should probably run and hide from those motherfuckers. I don't want to spoil important elements of the show for those who haven't seen it yet, but needless to say, Innie and Outie Mark both suffer as a result of this cowardice. But Lumen, who is aware of all of this, still believes that pushing Severance onto the world is a righteous and just cause. And I'll be honest, I do see an argument that it is. Nobody wants to feel pain, right? We all dread our trips to the doctor or to the dentist. We all have moments or events in our lives that we wish we didn't actually experience and feel. But if those experiences and that pain was removed from us, what would be left? Would a life without pain really lead to a life of only happiness, or would we start to become numb to the feeling of happiness without bad things to even us out? I liken this to people who worked 40 years at a job they hated and complained about all the way until retirement, only to find that once they were free to do whatever they want and live how they want, they sort of missed the feeling of structure and usefulness that working gave them. They can do anything they want now, but they can't fill the rest of their lives with interesting things to do. So without the pain of working, they start to lose their joy and freedom, and they're left helplessly hovering somewhere in between, feeling numb to everything. Well, damn, that got dark. Let's talk about another show that explores corporations who ignorantly believe they can do whatever they want with people's health and well-being, all for the sake of money and glory without facing consequences and repercussions.
What if there were a medicine that could heal, like, almost anything?
Well, yeah, that would be great, sure.
Yeah, right? But what if they didn't want you to know about it?
They? Sorry, who's they?
They is Big Pharma. It's the insurance companies, the government. Think about all the people who make tons of money just from keeping us sick by keeping us unwell.
Common Side Effects is the most recent Adult Swim success that's managing to keep the platform relevant for at least another year. I feel like Adult Swim somehow manages to get one of these hit shows every 6 months or so to keep the network afloat. But Common Side Effects, much like Severance, is definitely very deserving of all the hype and acclaim that it's gotten. It's got that classic, weird and trippy Adult Swim vibe that the network is known for, but it also has a surprising amount of drama and seriousness to it that makes it feel slightly different from the typical Adult Swim fare. The story is about a man named Bucket Hat Guy who manages to grow a mushroom that cures basically all ailments known to man, even death if ingested at the right time. Naturally, Big Pharma and the government find out about this miracle mushroom and do everything they can to secure it for themselves and remove Bucket Hat Guy from the picture. And by remove him from the picture, I mean kill him. They try really hard to kill the shit out of this guy. There are many characters that Bucket Hat Guy runs into who fall all over the gray spectrum of human morality. But it becomes pretty clear that no matter how shitty the people he meets on his journey may be, the true villains are Big Pharma and anyone who wants to use the mushroom for their own selfish reasons. It's hard to give a full analysis on Common Side Effects because Season 1 ends on a pretty open-ended note, and it seems like there's a lot more to this story than what we currently know. But I will say that based on what I have seen so far, the miracle mushroom that cures people of their pain may not be as healthy as people think. Again, I can't say this for sure yet because the show is just getting started, but it seems to me that on top of the messaging about how corrupt and greedy Big Pharma is, the show is also trying to warn against the complete elimination of pain as a good thing. Or at least the pursuit of that escape should not be seen as a wise endeavor. The people who use the mushroom are cured of their ailments for sure, but it always seems like new problems arise once they do. Bucket Hat Guy's life becomes an endless action movie nightmare of insanely stressful life or death situations, constant paranoia, and deep loneliness and isolation. He also brutally dies like 3 times in 10 episodes, which does not look very fun.
God damn, nigga! That shit hurt!
And even though it's his dream to use this mushroom to help save the world, I gotta think that his life would be much better if he never found this mushroom in the first place. Also, before we move on to the next subject, I gotta give a big shout out to Mike Judge. He's gotta be one of the busiest men in animation nowadays. Executive producer and voice actor on Common Side Effects, not to mention that Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill both came back to TV recently, and I'm sure he's got other smaller scale stuff that he's working on in the background. He's always been one of the greatest and most unsung creatives in the industry since he came in, and I feel like he deserves more credit for everything he's made over the last 30 years or so. Shout out to the god Mike Judge.
So this is what the Earth really looks like. And we're destroying it.
Lazarus is a very interesting case study in how something could have all of the elements of a good product and still turn out very mid. Sort of like how Five Guys has all the ingredients to make good hamburgers like buns, lettuce, onions, beef, ketchup, etc., but all their food somehow turns out as bland and average as vanilla cake. Vanilla cake is fine, it's edible, but it's just nothing special. Wait, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, the new Diet Cowboy Bebop anime without the space or all the other things that made Cowboy Bebop great. It does have a great opening theme song though.
Yep, that's good shit.
The plot of Lazarus is all about a cutting-edge pharmaceutical drug called Hopna that was released to the world on the pretense that it would cure us of all of our pain. This wasn't quite to the dramatic effect of the mushroom drug from Common Side Effects that could undo death, or as incredibly invasive and literally mind-altering as the Severance procedure, but Hopna does kill you 3 years after you ingest it, which obviously the world was not too psyched to learn years after the drug had already been released and everyone had used it. The explanation behind why the drug does this and why it was released to the public despite its fatal side effects is very spoiler heavy and convoluted, but mostly it's just kind of dumb and disappointing. If you can't tell by now, I really have a lot of issues with this story. There were some things to like about this series, like some of the characters and their backstories definitely had potential, but the overarching story and how it all comes together is definitely one of the weakest aspects of Lazarus. I will say that one of my favorite little things about the series is in these first few episodes, they all start with these ethereal monologues from each of the main characters about their backstories and why they all took the Hopna drug in the first place.
We started using Hopna as a substitute for drugs.
That's what was going through my head when I first heard about Hopna.
It hurt like a bitch. Guess the stuff has no effect on me.
These beautiful and evocative vignettes play all over the characters' narrations, and it really makes you think that Watanabe still has it when it comes to being a creative genius who can wow you with his stylish and unique artistry. Then the rest of the show plays and you remember just how washed he really is.
Here we go!
Wow.
The days of Shampoo and Bebop are long gone, my friends, and it doesn't look like they're coming back. But despite all of its issues, the show does bring up some interesting questions about the true nature of humanity and if we truly deserve salvation and benevolence. It just does it in the most uninteresting and bland way possible. And at the end of the day, it does connect to Common Side Effects and Severance in that the two main messages are clear. 1. Trusting Big Pharma or the government to cure us of our pain without them also adding to our pain in some way is the dumbest shit that we could possibly do. Right, Luigi?
Bingo!
And 2. We are all in pain, and we all seek a way to escape it, whether we want to admit it or not. Just like many of you, I have run from pain, I have run from embarrassment, I have run from failure, rejection, hard work, injury, commitment, all of it. And almost every time I shielded myself away from this pain, it was because I was too weak to face it head on, despite knowing that a better version of me potentially waited on the other side. Addicts who can't turn down their vice and continue to use to escape their problems. Kids who can't confront their bullies so they hide and run to escape a beatdown. Depressives who can't admit their faults so they push their doubts and shortcomings deep within to escape their true selves. They all fall under the same umbrella of cowardice and weakness. And as disheartening as this may be to hear, that's part of being human. Hypocritical and fearful of our own nature. We all suffer and go through hard times, and that suffering looks and feels different for everybody. When you are suffering, it can feel like a curse or a weight pressing down on you. Pain often feels like misfortune and sorrow, but that's never all that it is. Pain, sadness, and suffering is what allows joy, wealth, and triumph to feel so good. No matter how much you may try, you cannot escape pain, no more than you could escape joy and happiness. And I could go on and on with my own emo-ass diatribe about the subject, but like someone before me once said, it's always good to end your work with a quote because someone before you probably said it better than you ever could.
Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. It is the bitter potion by which the physician within you heals your sick self. Therefore, trust the physician and drink his remedy in silence and tranquility. Khalil Gibran.